fallout and debates continue over Donald Trump's handling of the Russian Ukrainian conflict. Many in the media are very critical of the way that Donald Trump has approached this situation. And MSNBC's host Lawrence O'Donnell had a particularly harrowing message for his audience, an analogy to a previous moment in history that Lawrence clearly feels is analogous to the moment we're in today. See if you can spot it.
World War II, World War II, World War II, during World War II, during World War II, during World War II, during World War II, after World War II, with Adolf Hitler, Adolf Hitler, Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler's, the whole world was tired of World War II, but it did not end by trying to make a Trump-like deal with Adolf Hitler, who started World War II. President Roosevelt never said to Adolf Hitler, here's how much of France you can keep if you just stop the war that you start.
Okay, I think I see where Lawrence O'Donnell is going with this. So look, in monologue after monologue, Lawrence O'Donnell makes the point that Vladimir Putin is our modern day Adolf Hitler. And Churchill, Roosevelt, these men didn't cede any territory to Hitler. Thus, it is anathema, it is insane to suggest that we as Americans should accept the idea that Donald Trump is going to give an inch of Ukrainian territory to Russia. And therefore, it's time for World War III? I mean, look, I don't think Lawrence O'Donnell wants World War III, and yet I think the metaphor that he repeats again and again on his program has some holes he doesn't seem to ever really grapple with. Yeah, not an inch of territory was ceded during World War II. It was World War II. The entire world went to war over it. Maybe Lawrence O'Donnell doesn't think that full-scale global war is what is needed to stop Vladimir Putin and Russia, which is fine. But I don't know because Lawrence O'Donnell doesn't get there. What he does instead is over and over again appeal to this kind of moral grandstanding, this intense moral righteousness, without at any point, talking about the other side of the ledger, the what it actually in practical, tactical terms means if his analogy is correct, if Vladimir Putin is Adolf Hitler. How far is Lawrence O'Donnell suggesting we should go? Because a metaphor like that would suggest pretty damn far. Are you ready to bomb Moscow? Send American troops? Or just fund France so they can invade from the West? And look, there are so many valid criticisms to be levied against Donald Trump and the way he has handled the Russia-Ukrainian situation. There are plenty of people who could argue that a very different strategy is warranted. Good arguments. Lawrence O'Donnell just doesn't make any of them. Doesn't make any of them. In monologue after monologue, at least the ones I've watched, he makes truly the worst arguments against Donald Trump, while simultaneously runs cover for a kind of war hawkish worldview that says we as the moral good in the world should be involved in conflicts until morality is fully restored, while pretending he's the one who actually wants peace. And it was somewhere around minute 10 of me watching Lawrence O'Donnell essentially advocate for nothing less than full Russian surrender, while not even just hand-waving, not addressing, yada yada yada-ing, the question of how do you get a major nuclear power to surrender in a massive land war in which they are painfully, slowly, and yet nevertheless seemingly winning, that I said, you know what? We should talk about this. My name is Carly Riley. This is the Carly P. Riley Show. I look at what powerful people are saying and I ask what and why and how, and we break it down and dissect it and do all the things. If you'd like to join me twice a week while I do that, I would love to have you subscribe to the channel or comment below or share this video if you get some value out of it. So look, I don't know what we should do to create peace in Eastern Europe. And certainly there are all sorts of arguments one might make as to why it is strategically inept for Trump to be going about things the way that he is. Appeasing dictators doesn't work. Emmanuel Macron tried to ingratiate himself with Putin to no effect. We've tried this before. It didn't work. Donald Trump's not going to be able to do it. And yet instead, Lawrence O'Donnell went for this.
The "I know exactly what I'm doing" tweet was a classic Trump case of what psychology calls projection. Projecting onto other people what you fear deep down about yourself, what you feel deep down about yourself. Donald Trump said, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I don't need the advice of people who have been working on all of these conflicts for years and were never able to do a thing to stop them. They are stupid people with no common sense, intelligence, or understanding. When you're the stupid person in the room, you feel it. You know it. I was that person in many rooms at Harvard University.
Okay, I'm not going to take that bait. I will say this. One of the central arguments that Lawrence O'Donnell made in his latest diatribe against Donald Trump and the handling of the Russia-Ukrainian situation is that Donald Trump is stupid. He's stupid. And we know he's stupid, according to Lawrence O'Donnell, because he put out a tweet calling other people stupid. And psychology tells us that that means he's stupid. Now look, setting aside the fact that I, in general, find the armchair psychologizing of Trump to be kind of tired and an ineffective line of argumentation, and that I don't particularly find calling him stupid a particularly compelling counter to a strategy debate about foreign policy, I also feel that, unwittingly or not, Lawrence O'Donnell happened to display one of Donald Trump's best arguments in favor of himself, saying, hey, you guys had 4 years to solve this conflict, to do it your way, to do the escalating sanctions, to do the economic warfare, to do all the things you wanted to do, and by the way, it didn't work, so I'm trying something else. It's not like a terrible argument by him. Like, it's not a terrible argument. And yet, again, Lawrence O'Donnell doesn't deal with that. He just says, you're stupid. But he says it in a very, I went to Harvard kind of way. So it gets weirder from here.
Donald Trump doesn't care about the survival of Ukraine. And so he's not really trying to negotiate anything. He's not negotiating. He's just trying to get the cameras into his reality show White House for something other than questions about Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay, look, you are going to get very little pushback from me on the idea that Donald Trump will do anything to distract from Jeffrey Epstein. Like, I am on that page. And yet, I mean, it's not as if this wasn't a conflict that was going on prior to the Jeffrey Epstein thing. It's not as if this isn't a major global conflict in which the United States is actually a pretty important piece of the entire puzzle. It's not as if this isn't something that Donald Trump hasn't been talking about for months, for years. And he wants to solve it. And he said he was going to solve it on day one, and then he didn't, so now he needs to because it's a campaign promise. This would be a thing Donald Trump would be dealing with, independent of whether or not the Epstein thing happened. And by the way, signs always pointed to the idea that he was going to be weirdly cozy with Vladimir Putin, and he felt like he had a read on Vladimir Putin, and he thought that Putin would make a deal because of him. So like him flying to meet with Putin in Alaska kind of seems par for the course, with or without Jeffrey Epstein. You know what I'm saying? So I just don't really feel like it's necessary to disingenuously create this backdrop upon which you then make a bunch of shitty arguments about why Donald Trump's strategy is stupid simply because he's stupid, not because we're making any sort of strategic counter-argument to his strategy. And yet all of this to me kind of connects up to an even more depressing, bigger picture. This was Lawrence O'Donnell a few months ago talking about the Russian-Ukrainian conflict.
Well, Donald Trump made history today, and so today became a day that will live in infamy.
A day that will live in infamy. Another World War II reference, the thing that Roosevelt famously said after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. What could it be? Think back 5 months ago. What happened that could be a day that would live in infamy, a la Pearl Harbor? Anything? No? Lawrence, tell us.
Since Russia invaded Ukraine, exactly 3 years ago on this day, the United Nations passed 6 resolutions against the Russian attack on Ukraine. And the United States voted with the free world against the Russian war on Ukraine every single time. Until today.
Are you fucking kidding me? That's the day that will live in infamy? The United States failed to vote on a non-binding UN General Assembly resolution? Infamy? By the way, they voted on 6 times previously, and it magically didn't stop Vladimir Putin from doing whatever the hell he wanted in Ukraine because it was a non-binding UN General Assembly resolution that means nothing? Okay, look. Lawrence O'Donnell feels like he lives in a beautiful post-World War II order that may never have actually in fact existed, but we can all pretend it did, and maybe it did, and it's lovely to think that it might have, which was a world in which the United States had a moral high ground. And that moral high ground meant something, and it meant something especially in the context of foreign policy. We were a moral good that stood up in the world for moral righteousness. And I'm pro-America, and I love America, and I love the values upon which we were founded. And yet I feel like I can't help but feel that there has always been a disconnect between the stated American values and the way in which we actually existed in the rest of the world post-World War II. 75 years later, we've had 10 major wars and 40, 50 plus more minor wars and interventions, bombings, regime changes, almost all in the name of our own moral righteousness. The way we behaved abroad often did not really jive with the values that we were espousing, even as we used those values as the justification for the things we were doing abroad. And Lawrence O'Donnell is like the human manifestation of that ideology, the Harvard man, who I'm sure is like a good human being and who means this all from a genuine place. But it is a kind of inadvertent war hawkishness that I don't know he would identify with. I don't know. I don't know if Lawrence O'Donnell would call himself a war hawk or not. But it strikes me that he is advocating for a kind of United States morality that has led us into escalating conflict after escalating conflict. That while itself not like a Lockheed Martin, Boeing, military-industrial complex style war hawkishness, it's arguably more dangerous because it gives a moral veneer, it gives a moral cover to that kind of war hawkishness. Lawrence O'Donnell has drawn this line in the sand in which he has said that Vladimir Putin is Adolf Hitler. That is the analogy he uses over and over and over again. He suggests pretty clearly that ceding an inch of territory, even considering ceding an inch of territory to our modern-day Adolf Hitler, Vladimir Putin, is completely inappropriate. Because that's not what America does. That's not what the free world stands for, goddammit. The free world signs the non-binding UN General Assembly resolutions. That's what the free world does. And on the other side of all of that lovely pontificating that he does so sort of well, is a war. Is a war. And what I'm saying with all of this is I am not a foreign policy expert. I hear arguments from across the political spectrum, and I think there's legitimacy to a lot of them, and I don't know where to fall. But there is something to me particularly grating, particularly frustrating, particularly vacuous, and frankly disingenuous about this moral pontificating about how Donald Trump doesn't really want peace because he really just wants to distract from Epstein because he's stupid, with absolutely zero engagement around the hard strategic realities facing any country who has to touch this war. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, I would love if you would consider sharing it with somebody else who you think might enjoy it, or subscribing to the channel.